All right, man, peace. You know, a lot of brothers, especially cats who watch the NBA from the 70s and 80s and 90s, they love to talk about which star players today would not have been able to play back in the 80s or 90s because they claim that that era would have been too physical for some of the players today. You know, you hear ludicrous statements like LeBron James couldn't have played back in the 80s, so on and so forth. But if there's one player that I watch today who's considered a star or borderline superstar, that I say, if this dude played back in the 90s, he would have had problems, it's definitely James Harden. This dude relies on so much chicanery just to get his shots off, and so much preferential treatment from the referees to be able to execute his offensive moves, that I have to wonder what he would have done back in the era of the 90s when cats might pick you up for 94 feet. They could put their hands on you, and they certainly could make you adjust your dribbling style. It's so important for James Harden to be able to go in between the legs 5,000 times. He knows that if he beats his initial defender, due to the fact that the four other players on the court with him are basically standing behind the three-point line, if he beats his initial defender, he's going to be at the cup without anyone really trying to challenge him. I'm not saying that James Harden is not a very good offensive player, but some of these sentiments that he's the best offensive player since Kobe or Jordan, I mean, it's ludicrous. It's nonsense. I could probably name 3 or 4 players from the early 2000s who are right there on the same level as James Harden offensively. Once again, I'm not trying to say that the brother can't play. He's a very good offensive player. But if you put him back in the 80s or 90s, he probably would have been considered more of an instant offense off the bench type player, rather than someone that you want to run your offense through. There's no way that he would have been able to play that same role back in the 90s, because the referees certainly would not have allowed him to do the cha-cha-cha and the merengue and the salsa with the basketball in his hands like he does in today's NBA. This guy literally takes 4, 5, 6 steps and no one says anything, and he even makes fun of it sometimes. Why am I bringing all this up? Because James Harden, he recently had some type of Adidas function where he was speaking to children, and he basically told them that every season you have to bring new moves to an NBA court. You have to add certain components to your repertoire to make yourself a more well-rounded player. And he said that he's created a new move that's going to look like a travel, but it's not. That's how you know that, you know, deep down, you realize that you can't beat players one-on-one the natural way. When you're in the NBA rule book trying to figure out exactly what you can do after the gather and all this other shit, when you have to go to those lengths and to that extent, you're saying that you know that you really can't beat great defense just based on what you do. And that's why you see the precipitous drop-off in productivity from James Harden in the playoffs sometimes. When I say precipitous drop-off, I'm talking about in levels of proficiency. Once again, he's a great offensive player. Is he on the level of Jordan or Kobe, especially in those 2 seasons when Kobe had the green light, or Wilt Chamberlain back in the 60s? Of course not. He's pretty much a product of the elevated offensive tolerance of the 2010s, or really the late 2010s. And I think that he's just a player who's destined to go down as never winning a championship, because he does not have a championship mentality, and he also just does not have a championship skill set. Like, there are certain intangibles that championship level players bring that he doesn't bring. Most championship players are at least capable on the defensive end. Now, he's become a much more capable defensive player, but right now he's 30. So he's only going to get worse defensively. Offensively, he has no post-up game whatsoever, and he's more concerned with making sure that the offense runs through him than anything else. He doesn't particularly make his teammates that much better. It's really the system that makes his teammates better than they probably would be in other systems. Guys like PJ Tucker, you put him on other teams, yeah, he'd be a great glue guy, but he would not be as known as he is on the Rockets. I remember PJ Tucker when he was on the Raptors. He was nowhere near as known as he is now, and it's mostly because of the system. But just getting back to James Harden, we're going to see him at a meeting with some kids, and he's going to make the ludicrous statement that the new move that he's created is going to look like a travel, but it's not. And you're even going to see the children laughing at him because they know that he's becoming, or he has become, a big joke. As talented and offensive player as he is, James Harden has become a big joke. And that's why their team, the Houston Rockets, led by himself and Russell Westbrook next season, a.k.a. Dumb and Dumber, they're going to be a team, like I told a certain brother, it wouldn't shock me to see them win the NBA championship. It wouldn't shock me to see them go out in the first round. That's how wide a disparity the expectations can be of the Rockets, because they did improve in that other guard spot by trading CP3 for Westbrook, a.k.a. Russell Westbrook. But as we all know, Russell Westbrook has one of the lowest basketball IQs of any player on his level of talent and prestige in the history of basketball. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
James Harden also, as we know, elevated the step back to another level in the NBA. And anyone who thinks he's traveling now, well, get ready, he says, get ready.
Look at this nonsense right here. And I can't even really blame James Harden as much as I do the referee. You allow this dude, and you're looking dead at him, to take 4 or 5 steps and then pull up and you don't blow the whistle. That's an abomination. A referee like that should be severely excoriated by whoever they have to report to.
That's what Chef Harden said about the latest movies cooking up.
You gotta find ways to get better every single year. You gotta find ways to create an advantage every single year. And that's what I'm doing. You know, and it's not travel. You know, this year I'm gonna come up with something more creative that is gonna look like it's travel, but it's not. And
even the little kids are laughing at his dumb ass.
It's gonna look like a new travel, but it's not. BS or real talk. Ooh, Dave, go ahead.
He believes it. So it's real talk for him. This is a guy who won the MVP 2 years ago, has been top 2 in MVP voting.
James Harden's the type of dude who'll come up with a new move that he's going to use for the upcoming season, film it, and then send it to the NBA league offices to find out if that should be considered a travel or not. And if they say no, then he'll say, please send this out to all the referees and let them know that I'll be using this move this year. He's that type of guy. Like real great offensive players, they stay within the realm of what's allowed. And it's pretty straightforward what a travel is and what it isn't. That's why people think that he's inventing new moves. He's really not. James Harden did not invent the step back. The step back jump shot was being used back in the 70s and the 80s. It's nothing new. Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Adrian Dantley, all these guys use step back jump shots. But the difference is that they would take a dribble when they step back. Kobe Bryant, all these guys use a step back. This guy, James Harden, just takes 3, 4, 5, 6 steps back, like he's doing a moonwalk.
Last 3 years, he knows what types of calls he gets from the NBA referees, and so to him, when he's going to enter into a new move into his game next year, he will fully expect to get the benefit of the calls and be allowed to do and operate how he does.
See, I don't know if he actually believes it, but he...
His name should be James Sanders, because he looked like Barry Sanders' little nephew there.
He's going to push the envelope as far as he can and go up to that line and past that line. And if they're not willing to call it, then that's on the refs. It's not on him. But of course it's going to be a travel.
I mean, look, officials...
Dude said, but of course it's going to be a travel. That's bad, man. The NBA really needs to do something about that. But they're pushing offense so stridently that they just going to let that fool get away with anything.
On the tape and tell you at least of what most of that he has done in the past, that you know there's a gather and that's part of what looks like it's part of a travel, but it's not, and all of that. I do think what he was saying to those impressionable young children is true. Look, it's the job of a basketball player to look at the rule book and do what is in the rules to score points, and that is what he has done. The question then becomes, what do they do in the playoffs, right? And so calls are different in the playoffs, defenses are different in the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We could have this whole discussion again, and in fact we will, when he introduces his new move that looks like a travel, but isn't. Let's talk about...
It's going to be a new 10-step move. We can call it the cha-cha-cha to the basket. But anyway, we'll see what happens with Mr. James Harden. Players like him are necessary in the league. You're always going to need them because, you know, they bring adornment, they bring decoration to a league. Every generation, and an NBA generation is about 15 years long, you're only going to have about 4 or 5 players who are championship material players. Back in the day, it was Bird, Dr. J, Moses Malone, Magic, Kareem. Then later on in the decade, you had Isaiah Thomas. In the 90s, it was Jordan, Olajuwon, Pippen. You had a couple of other players who were also championship caliber, like a John Stockton, but he was never able to get over the hump because he did not have the physical gifts of a Jordan or of an Olajuwon. But when it comes to intangibles and basketball IQ, Stockton was right there. In the 2000s, of course, you had Shaq and Kobe and Tim Duncan, so on and so forth, KG, those type of players who were championship level players. Every generation you have those type of players, and then you also have the guys who are just there for decoration. The Reggie Millers, the Patrick Ewings, the Charles Barkleys. If you squint your eyes, they look like they're championship level players, but they're really not. But you need them because they bring that level of drama and theater. That's who James Harden is. He's going to be that Alex English, that Bernard King type. He's never going to get over the hump, though. But who knows? They might shock me. They might shock me. As I've stated, the Rockets, I could see them going out in the first round. I could also see them winning the championship. It's a possibility. So anyway, peace.